Hi, it's Dave from ThinkOutsideTheSlide.com. This is a typical timeline text slide that I have seen very often where somebody has typed in the dates and what event happens on each of those dates in terms of the timeline for this. In this case, it's project approval. Now, if you type this into PowerPoint and then you go to the design ribbon and then you go to designer, what PowerPoint does is it comes up with some suggestions about different types of visuals that would represent this set of time, this set of dates. And what it's doing is it's creating smart art. And so when we look at some of the common ones, here are two common ones that I see a lot. This one here and this one here. These are very common. This, unfortunately, is not a good visual representation. And let me explain two reasons. First of all, this horizontal line that represents the time, we're not sure what time frame it represents. So we're not able to really present to the board, to the executives, what this is accurately. Because the other thing that happens is because this is smart art, it just equally spaces these 6 events. It doesn't take into account what dates those actually are, and it doesn't accurately represent them. In a recent workshop, this is exactly the thing that I saw. When I was talking to the CFO, I said to him, I said, you know, this is not giving the board and the executives that you're presenting this to an accurate representation. And he agreed. He said, we need to accurately show these dates so that they understand what the challenges are in any time frame. So what I want to show you today is show you how to create this sort of a visual in PowerPoint. It is a visual that is an accurate timeline. We have a horizontal line and we have an explicit, what is that timeline? It's March 1st to November 30th. So everybody knows what time frame we are representing on this visual. And then each of these particular events are placed exactly when they occur along that time frame. Now we're giving an accurate representation to the executives and the board. So let me show you how I create this. And where I start is actually not in PowerPoint, because one of the things you need to remember is these need to be accurate. So we need to calculate the total length of the line and where each of those events is going to show up. And so what I've done is I've created an Excel spreadsheet that allows us to do this. Now I'll put a download link in the description down below. What I've done here is you enter the start date and the end date. Now, what should those be? Well, if you've got a few months, as I do in this particular example, then I would usually do the first day of the first month to the last day of the last month. So you see here 1st of March to 30th of November. If you have a multi-year span, I might want to do sort of January 1st to December 31st in a few years, just because most people like to see full years. But you can make that decision, and then the spreadsheet here will calculate how many days are in between that start date and the end date. And then you can set the timeline length. Now, you'll notice here it is an input. I set it at 10. 10 inches fits quite nicely on a 16 by 9 slide, gives you space around it, which is a really good thing to have a little bit of space left and right. But you can change this, and again, whether you use centimeters, if you use centimeters, put in whatever you want here, 25 centimeters, something like that, and it will recalculate. And then you put in the actual event dates. Here we have the 6th of March, 15th April, etc. And I've allowed for 10 here. Obviously, if you have more than that, you can decide whether you want to extend this or actually go to a second slide. And I've got a video on how you can create a timeline that moves from one slide to the next. And I'll link to that in the top corner. But what it does, the spreadsheet does, is it calculates what position, meaning how many inches from the start of the timeline, this particular event should be positioned. That's going to be important because now we're needing to calculate where each of those events occur. So once we know these positions have been calculated, now we can go back to PowerPoint and start. So we're going to start with a line. I'm going to go back to my home ribbon. I'm going to use a horizontal line that's 10 inches long. So I'm going to grab my line tool, and before I start drawing, I'm going to hold the shift key down. That makes it horizontal no matter where my cursor goes. And then I'll release it, and then I will go to the shape format ribbon, and I'll just zoom in here so you can see this. It allows you to actually type in the size, the length of this line. So I'm going to type in, I want it to be 10 inches. And again, if you're working in centimeters, you would type in the appropriate number for those units. And it automatically now positions that line to be exactly 10 inches. Now it's not centered, so I'm just going to grab it and move it so it's more centered for where I want. Now we need to position each of those events. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating what I call a positioning horizontal line. This is simply a line that represents that length that was calculated in the Excel spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by drawing that horizontal line underneath my timeline. I'm going to grab my line tool here, and again I'm going to draw a horizontal line. I don't need this one to be very long. And I'm going to set it to be the exact length that I need for the first event. So let's go back to Excel here. The first event, 0.22. Okay, so I'll go to the sizing again and put 0.22. Now I need to line it up with the left end of the timeline. So I'll select both of them. So I've selected the first one. I'll control click to select the second one. And then on the shape format ribbon, I'll zoom in again here. What I want to do is I want to use align, and I'll say align to the left. So one of the things with the alignment tools in PowerPoint is that it will align it to whichever object is most in that direction. So align left aligns everything to the leftmost object. Align right, align everything to the rightmost object. So we're going to see how this alignment allows us to position things without us having to really manually do anything. So I'm going to say align left, and now I know I have the left end aligned, and the right end of this small positioning line is exactly where I need that first event vertical line to be. Now I can draw my vertical line. So I'll select my line tool again. I'll draw a vertical line as long as I need it to be. Now each of these lines, again, you can format it. So for example, if I want a circle on each end, I can just go to the shape outline here, drop that down and say in the arrows, I want to use the circle on each end. And again, you can go to the more styles and give you a lot more options in terms of size and that sort of thing. And you'll notice there it's got the two circles on the ends. So now what I want to do is I want to position it to the left of my positioning line. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to use the alignment to the right. I've selected my vertical line, control click on my positioning line. And again, under shape format, I'm going to say align, and I'm going to say align to the right. Now I know that this vertical line is correctly positioned along my timeline. I will select it, and I want to move it above the timeline. So I'm going to hold the shift key down before I start moving. This means I will only move it vertically, and it won't waver in a horizontal direction. So I'll move it vertically above where the timeline is. Now I want to align the bottom of this vertical line with that horizontal line. I'll select the horizontal line in addition to the vertical line and use my alignment to say align bottom. Now I have my first event line positioned perfectly along my timeline. Now it's always a good idea with your timeline to add text that tells the viewer what dates are you showing. So I'm just going to add a text box down here at the bottom which says March 1 to November 30. And again, if that text is a little big, I'll just make this smaller, 12 point. I don't need it very big. Now we've added that text. Now we need to add the text for the event. So we can add it wherever we want. So we can take a text box and we can add our dates here. Maybe we don't need it quite so large. 16 points. So this was March 6th. And instead of retyping it, if you want, what you can do is go back to the original text slide. Simply copy the text. Control C copy. Go back to my text box here. And then instead of just Control V paste, I can go to my paste drop down here. And I can say keep the text only. And what this does is that it keeps the text and uses the formatting that I have chosen for the text. So now I can make this maybe a little wider. I can do some other formatting. So let's say I want March 6th to be in a larger font. Let's say I'm going to make this, let's say 18. I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to change the color of it. So you can format it to look the way that you want. And that's all personal preference for whatever you need for your particular organization's, color scheme and that sort of stuff. So we've positioned our first line. Now we need to do the next line. So we're going to just take our positioning line and make the length for the next event. Let's go back to Excel here. So the next one is 1.67 inches. Okay. So I'll just, in the shape format, change the size to 1.67. Now that's longer. Now, instead of drawing a new vertical line, I could just simply copy this particular vertical line that I've already got because it already has all the formatting that I wanted. I'm going to select it. I'm going to hold the Control key down, and I'm going to drag it down here again so that it is to the left of the right end of my positioning line. Now I'll select my positioning line so I have both the new vertical and the positioning line selected. Use my Align Right. Got that positioned properly. And now if I want this particular vertical line to, let's say, be below the timeline, because again, alternating above and below might make it fit better, I can select my new vertical line. I can select, Control click to select my timeline, and under Shape Format, say Align Top, because now we're aligning to the topmost object. And now we can take our text here. We can copy that. Again, Control drag to copy it. We can update the text. Here it's April 15th. We'll copy that and do our paste of just the text here. Take my April 15th, copy that, and then paste just the text where it was. That gives you the formatting. Just saves you from retyping. Okay. So now what I can do is I can go one by one, always referring back to my Excel spreadsheet to get the length of the positioning line, then adjust the positioning line length here, duplicate my vertical lines, and duplicate my text. And now what we can do is we can create this sort of a visual where we have an accurate timeline, an accurate positioning of each of those dates along that timeline. Now we are giving our board, our executives, our decision makers, accurate information for them to make decisions on. So don't accept the smart art that PowerPoint can create for you. Create your own accurate timelines when you want to present date-based information to executives and decision makers.